Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our Excel Pivot Table Part 2. And my name is Marites Macapagal, and I'm from the MTA Organization Design Development under the Computer Training Team. And today we are going to have a brief session about the continuation of Excel Pivot Table. Last week, for those of you who have joined me, we have Excel Pivot Table Part 1, where we have learned how to create a pivot table. So this afternoon, we are going to continue in learning how to create a pivot table. Now, allow me to just turn off my video so you could focus on the presentation I am going to share with you. Now, what is our objective for today's class? So for today's class, participants will be able to refresh pivot table data manually and automatically. And of course, we're also going to learn how to change pivot table source. We are going to talk about field settings, and we're going to organize pivot table. And to organize, I'm talking about sorting it and using the show hide option. Now, also in this presentation that you see, I have a lot of links. Okay, these are links from Microsoft where you could actually read some information pertaining to the different topic I will cover this afternoon. So after the class, if not today, tomorrow, once the list of all the attendees are generated, I am going to share with you this presentation. So let's all start, and let me just minimize this presentation, and you now see an Excel workbook. And I am just going to have a brief review of what we did last week, creating a pivot table. Okay, so for those who have missed part 1, and I'm just going to quickly just show you how do I convert or create a pivot table out of this huge list in Excel. So in this list, there are actually about 278,527 rows. And to show you that, take a look. The last row is 278,528, in fact. So allow me to just go back to the top of the screen. I just wanted to show you how big the list is. And take a look at the list. I have, in this list, our first row is basically the single row that we need before creating a pivot table. So these are the column headings, okay, that we are going to use once we start creating our pivot table. So how do we create our pivot table? Based from what I've shown you before, just make sure after cleaning up or preparing your data list, click anywhere within the table or your listings, okay? Once you have done that, simply go to Insert ribbon, and in the Insert ribbon, you will see Tables group. In the Tables group, you have Pivot Table and also Recommended Pivot Table. Just allow me to use the Recommended Pivot Table for the meantime, just to show you the different options. When you're rushing and you need to get some idea of what are the possible pivot table layout you could actually use, if you click on recommended pivot table, you notice how automatically Excel will automatically select the entire range of cells that we have. You see the running marquee surrounding the entire listing. And right in front of you right now is the recommended pivot table. So these are the recommended pivot tables. You see from the very top, you have some of the hours by course. As I click and hover, okay, you see them with the description, the name and the description, and a sample of the layout that we have. There we go. I'm just clicking in each one of them and showing you the generated list. count of employee ID by course name. So if you would like to have a list of the count of how many employees have completed, the mandated training by course name, and this is what you're going to get. This is an old report, okay, that we have, and I used to run this report, but these report, don't worry, have been reshuffled. Okay, this I just have to use it so that you will have an idea of real the real data that you could actually use PivotTable for. So if I continue, I would say count of employee ID by the course name, and these are the course code rather. Some or I'm not, this is using the word some, but it could be converted to the count, and of course using this different sum of the ID per course code. Once you have selected them, you could actually be able to edit them also. Okay, so these are some of the example of what you have. So right here, if I say the count of employee ID by course name, and if I select that and click OK, notice how quickly it will generate a result for me. There you go. So it gave me the list of the different course name. And if you expand, you will also be able to see the name of the employees who have actually completed it. And then down here, you also could see the count or the number of employees who have taken or completed the mandated training using the employee ID number as a means to count. Okay, now let me go back to it and let me show you the long way of doing it. So once you click anywhere within the list, just making sure, of course, you have cleaned up and prepared your data, meaning you have completely populated all the blank rows and columns. All you have to do is simply go to Insert. Instead of the recommended pivot table, you select pivot table. Once you select the pivot table, once again, select the table arrange automatically based on the worksheet that you are in. It will pick up the name of the worksheet, raw data, and that's the name that we have right here. And it will give you the range, okay? And the range, as you could see, is an absolute cell reference from A1 down to P, what is it, to P 278,528 row. So and choose where you want the pivot table to be placed. By default, the radio button, the black dot, you refer to it as radio button, it's in the new worksheet. And that's what I want. I would simply click OK, and I got it right there. So if I would like to count how many employees per business unit have taken the mandated training in 2019, so I will use the pay business unit. That's the pay business unit. And I will drag it to the location where I would like it to be. So these are the business unit. But I need to count based on the employee ID number. So I will select employee ID number and bring it over to the values. By default, it will use the word sum. Okay, so it will use the operator sum. I would like to get the count, not total, the employee ID number. So I would simply click on the drop down arrow. This is one way of editing it. You go to the value, field settings, and instead of sum, replace it with a count. So now you have the count of the employee ID number. Simply click on OK, and you now have the count. If I would like to add an additional, so let's say for instance, I would like to put based on count also based on the job title. There you go. So you could see the job title, how many, if you are in bridges and tunnel, how many cleaners took the mandated training, how many car inspector. So depending on what you wanted to actually be able to see and view. Okay, so you could make it very detailed. And that's how you create a pivot table. So that's a quick review of how to build a pivot table. Okay, so allow me to just minimize this And I am just going to go to the next topic, which I will actually start on a new topic today, which is basically how do we refresh a pivot table data? Okay, so I am going to open another, let me just open another workbook, and I will just use a document. I will have here pivot table, part 2 data files, and I'm going to open the mandated training row data. Okay, I have this row data with updates. There you go. Okay, now this is already created, and I want you to take a look at this pivot table that has been created. Look at the summary page. It has a 0, so something, meaning in that row, as part of that pay business unit, there is something that indicate that there is a 0 name in it. Okay. So I know I have to search for that 0 by going back to the row data, but I cannot, okay, in actuality, you cannot change the data directly in your pivot table, but you could refresh the data to update the data for the pivot tables in your workbook. So I have to go to the row data and do the changes right there. Once you have made the changes, you go back to your pivot table and you could refresh the data for pivot tables from that source table in this workbook that you have actually edited. Okay, so how do we do that? So again, I wanted to make sure I will be able to remove this. Now also take a look at the fields that we have right here. Okay, so if I go to the row data, if I scan and go all the way, I will be able to see that there is a 0, and that's the one that's causing that kind of problem in the summary. So I will select that row and obviously delete that row. Something's wrong with that. So that's not really could have accidentally be copied. Okay, so let me go up, Control Home to go up to the top of the list. Now also, there's an additional field called status. Status is in our row data, but if you look at the summary, you don't see status on the list because that is something that has been added to your list. So now, since I would like to refresh my file, okay, or my pivot table correctly, let us actually do this option to be able the steps to manually refresh, right? After you have seen all the different errors that we need to refresh. So what you have to do is simply click anywhere in the pivot table, right? Because once you click in here, you will get the pivot table analyze ribbon. This is the contextual ribbon that automatically appears, right? And in here, you will see one group called data. And there's what you call refresh. If you click on the drop down arrow, it would say refresh and refresh all. So either you click on refresh or press all, doesn't really matter, or you could just simply click on the refresh button and take a look. It will remove the 0 because we have deleted it from the row data. And also, once you have refreshed, status now is added to the list. That was not there earlier, but because you refreshed, you were able to get it. Okay, so again, by default, pivot tables are not refreshed automatically, but you could specify that the pivot table is automatically refreshed when you open the workbook that contains the pivot table. So how do we, set up our pivot table so that it could refresh data automatically when you're opening the workbook that you have used or where you have created a pivot table, just like in this case. So again, once again, make sure you click anywhere in this pivot table and go to the pivot table analyze ribbon. In the leftmost section right there where you see pivot table group, there is an option. Okay, and there's a drop down arrow next to the option. All you have to do is click on the drop down arrow and you see options. Click on options and you will get the pivot table options. And one of the tabs, so these are the layouts, you could see all of those things. You could review this and be able to make any of those changes or customization. But if you look all the way, there is the data tab in this dialog box. So once you have seen that data tab right there, you see it. Okay. So all you have to do is take a look in the pivot table data. Make sure you put a check mark on refresh the data when opening the file. In that way, if you know that your file is going to be refreshed or it's going to be edited, once you open it, all the changes would automatically be refreshed. Okay, so all you have to do is put a check mark into it and simply click on OK. Next time when you save this and you reopen it, it will just to automatically refresh. So, but don't forget to save the changes. Okay. Now that is again I have completed and have shown you how to refresh pivot table data. Now let's go to the next topic. The next topic is to change pivot table data source. So allow me to save this. And I'm just going to close this, Control W to close. Allow me also to save this 29th mandated and allow me to close it, Control W, so I don't have too many things open. And this time I'm going to open another file where I could demonstrate to you how to change pivot table data source. So I will browse and I will now open the multiple mandated training row data. Okay, so I will click on it. I will open it. And this is my multiple mandated training row data. So take a look at what we have right here. So the topic is changing the pivot table data source. So therefore, you could actually change the data source of your pivot table if you decide that you no longer want your current source data or if you added additional data in your data source. In this case, I have a pivot table report, okay? And I have two sources, mandated training, okay, where I have the list of MTE return to work. Okay, so this is return to work COVID-19. That's a CAS code. And the other is the ADA sensitivity training. Okay, so two reports had actually been generated, placed in one workbook, and you only want to generate one pivot table. But whichever is needed, you're just going to connect it to the proper data source. Okay, so before checking, let us convert the two worksheets into a table. So right now, these tables are not converted into a table. So it is always wise, again, for those of you who were in my pivot table part 1, I have demonstrated and shown to all of you how to convert a list into a table. So the quick and easy way, I am currently right now in mandated TRN 012. So I'm just going to convert this list into a table. To do that, I will use the keyboard combination Control T, and it would say create a table. And notice the running marquee surrounding the entire list. Okay, for this particular worksheet, mandated TRNs, MDR, MND TRN 012. And it is capturing the entire list. My table has headers. Those are the headers. When I click on OK, take a look in your table design, you have table 1. So this list has been converted to a table instead of calling it table 1. So it's easier for us to identify it. Use the same name as what we have down at the bottom. So I'm just going to use all caps MNDTRN 012 and simply hit the enter key. Okay. Let me do it again for the other list. Okay, so you could also use the insert option and click on table. That's another way of doing it. And again, the entire list has been created or selected, and my table has headers. I would simply click on OK. And now we have a second table, table 2, and I will just rename it with NYC TADA, NYCTADA, and simply hit the enter key. Now, if you look at the name box, I have 2 of them. This is MNDTRN012, and the other one I could switch to NYCTADA. Perfect, right? So if I go now to my report, I will go back to my report since I have converted the list, and I will be able to identify it quickly. And before we do that, I'm just going to add, okay, the course name. Okay, so I'm going to add the course name on top of the pay business unit. So this is what I'm going to do. I will click on course name and drag it right on top of the pay business unit. There you go. And now you could see that, I am using for this report, the MTA return to work, which means I'm using this worksheet, MNDTRN 012, right? So let's go to the report once again, and let's take a look. So how do I switch? So since I am in the pivot table, click on the pivot table analyze ribbon. In the data group, you see the option change data source. If you click on the drop down arrow, there's a change data source option. If I click on it, it will open the dialog box that says change pivot table data source, and it gives you the name of the data source, and it is currently selected. Okay, so all you have to do is simply type and replace it with NYC TADA to replace it, and simply click it on OK. And take a look. I was able to switch. Now the report is showing data extracted from this data source. And that's how simple it is to be able to do that. Plain and simple, correct? Okay, thank you. Now let's move on, because I have some other things I would still wanted to show you before the class. Anyway, once again, this is being recorded, and you will see the recording in the MTAU, and I will let you know once it becomes available. Okay. Next, I am going to show you different steps to modify a pivot table data and field setting. Okay, so another way to change the field settings. A while ago, I have shown you that you could do the field setting in here, isn't it? If you go here, you could change the value field setting options. Okay, so I am going to add an additional employee ID field in the value area, which I'm going to demonstrate again how to be able to change the settings. Okay, so I pulled employee ID number and added it in the value. And you could see the first one that we have is the count of the employee ID number. Now, I would like to use the second employee ID field in the value counts to actually show basically the percent of each business unit against the grand total. So what I'm going to do is right here, I will click on the drop down arrow or simply click on it. You will get the value field setting option. Okay. So the value field setting dialog box is now open. Now, how do we modify? Remember I said earlier, to be able to make the sum and convert it to count, we use this. The first tab, summarize values by the sum, the count, the average, the maximum, minimum, and so forth and so on. There is another tab right here, okay? And if you click on show value as, there you go. So in the summarize show value as, right, you could see now one of the option here, I could click here, is the number of the percentage of the grand total. So if I do that, I click on it and it will give, before I click on OK, right? You could actually also format, number format, and notice how it automatically selected it to percentage and it gives me 2 decimal places, right? So that's basically the number of formats. I'm not going to touch it, but I'm just showing you that you could actually be able to see it too based on the number format option. And in here, I could rename this and call it with how I would like to generate it. I would say percent of grand total. Oops, sorry. I will turn off my percent of grand total. And all I have to do is click OK. And there you go. You have the percentage based on the grand total. Okay. Each agency, okay, gave the representation of its portion based on the grand total. Okay. So now, other things that you could do if you would like to convert or sort it rather by descending, or if I click on the count of the employee number and wanted to sort it, so I could click on sort and sort it from the largest to the smallest. And there you go. Of course, the New York City Transit has the highest number of count, highest percentage for the grand total. So you could actually do that depending on how you wanted to see your report. Okay, so I'm going to, if I wanted to do sort again based on smallest to largest, it will give you based on the smallest to largest too. Now take a look. Also in here, I have this one, the plus signs and the minus signs. Okay, so when you click on the plus, it will expand and show you the list of the names of the people. So you could actually see who among the employees have taken or completed the training, right? So these plus and minus could also be seen in the pivot table analyze. I could do it independently, each one of them. But if I would like to expand all of them, you see that expand field right here under the pivot table analyze active cell. If I click on expand field, notice how all of them will expand. There you go. Everything will be expanded. But if I wanted to collapse all of the list, I could just simply click on the collapse field option in my pivot table analyze. Other things that you could actually be able to do is you can also enhance the report layout of your pivot table for easy viewing and reading of data. Now, to access the layout, again, make sure that a cell is selected in your pivot table. And right here, you have your design tab. And in your design tab, if you look on your left, you see the layout group. In the layout group, let's just expand one so that you could see it. Let me just expand a smaller one right there. Now take a look. So if I say report layout, show in compact form, this is compact form. Show in outline form, you see how it changes the look of your layout. Okay. And then show in tabular form, this is tabular form. And repeat all items in label, you see that? And do not repeat items label. And if I wanted to bring it back to comfort form, it will be back to comfort form. Beautiful, isn't it? Okay. Now also, let's say for instance, you are going to use the subtotal and the grand totals. Okay. So I'm going to, it's too busy. I'm going to remove, I am also going to show you how do I remove a particular field that I don't need in my report. So I've shown you how to get the percentage of grand total. To get rid of it, you could either click on the drop down arrow here and say remove fields, or the easiest way is simply click on it and drag it out. Okay, so that's how easy it is. Okay, click on it and drag on it. So now I had the bridges channels right here, and I'm just going to sort this from the smallest. So, okay, so this is my smallest to the highest. So I am here on the smallest. So I am just going to show the grand total. So I'm just going to expand so you could see, okay, subtotals. Do not show subtotals. You see how it removes the subtotals, okay? Show all subtotals at the bottom of the group. So you don't see it here because if you scroll down, you will see it at the bottom. There you go. That's a subtotal. And if you say show all subtotals at the top of the group, again, if I scroll up, it will be at the top of the group. Okay? That is having the subtotals. If you wanted the grand total of, okay, so let me just collapse this. So this is your grand total of the rows and columns. There is no grand total. On for rows and columns. On for row only. On for columns only. See how beautiful? And what is this row blank rows? So notice insert blank line after each item. That's how it will look. Remove blank line after each item. Is that the look that you're going to get? Beautiful, right? So those are the ways to be able to enhance the layout of your table. Aside from, of course, if you would like to use the PivotTable styles, if you click on the more, when you hover, you could be able to see the different look based on the color and the design that you have. Okay, if you're using a colored printer, you might want to use a particular design to put emphasis on certain information. It's up to you. Okay, you are the creator of the report. You know what's the best format to use that people will appreciate and will not have a hard time reading your data. Okay, so that's basically using your design option. Let me click away to remove it. Okay, so I have shown you how to sort them in descending and descending. I have shown you how to hide. Now, next topic is basically how to use what you call the slicer. Okay. In PivotTable, slicers provide buttons that you could click to filter tables or PivotTable. In addition to quick filtering, slicer also indicate the current filtering state, which make it easy to understand what exactly is currently being displayed because you could see all the different options. So in these current report that we have, I am going to use a slicer, okay? So how do we get the slicer? If you go to your PivotTable Analyze, under the filter option, you see Insert Slicer right there. So if you click on Insert Slicer, notice you have the list of the different field headings. And there's a checkbox in each corresponding field name. So all you have to do is click or select or use the checkbox to select the different fields that you would like to obtain the slicer option. So in this case, I am using the pay business unit right there. I'm also going to select department, and last but not the least, the employee status. Those are important for me to get. So all I have to do is click OK, and I get those three. Notice, once I have the slicer, this field setting on the right, the navigation on the right disappears. So I'm just going to move this because this will be used now to filter your data. Okay, so this is the list. So you notice I'm putting my mouse on the heading. That's how you could actually move it. When you put your mouse on the heading, the mouse turns to the white arrow with a 4-directional arrow, and that allows you to be able to move. And these are all the employee status. Okay. Now, let me click here again. What if I use employee status and put it also in the filter so you could see how it really works? Although I don't really need to use employee status filter option here, but I just want you to see, how it reacts to it. So in here, let me just explain to you what you could actually see. This icon will allow you, this gives you, of course, the slicer heading, indicate the category of the item. So these are the different category of field names. Employee status, pay business unit, and department. I refer to it as category because you're filtering it. What category are you going to use to filter it? Oh, okay. Sure, Thomas. Yeah, that's good. Okay, so you have all of this in here. Now, for instance, on the salesperson, right? On salesperson employee ID status. So if I'm just going to know, I would like to know based on the grand total, I have 134, 13,458. How many of which are active? I click on active. So these are active 13,414. There you go. So it gives you the number quickly, right? So I will clear and filter. What if I just want to focus on a particular pay business unit? So I would say, for instance, bridges and tunnel. Take a look. So this is my total. And look in here, if you could see, are the list of the different departments. Only the darker color are basically the department that belongs to bridges and tunnel. So if I, let's say, use this and wanted to see operations right there, it gives me the total. Active from bridges and tunnel on this department. See how nice? If I clear this, it will give me all the bridges and tunnel people. If I clear this, it will give me the employee status, that's all the complete listings once again. So that's how you filter. And what's nice about it is you could see it as you select the criteria. Now, what is this icon in here? It says multi-select. If I turn this on, notice, okay, that if I click on active right now, notice it would say multiple items. If I click on the drop down arrow, active now becomes except for employee status based on the filter based on leave, leave with pay, retired, suspended, terminated. These are the number that you have, right? So I click OK. Only 44 are in this employee status, except, of course, the active. If I remove the filter and remove this, then I could go back to the usual way of filtering things. Okay? Let me just click on the border and make this shorter again. And I'm just going to show you another way of filtering. Basically, of course, using what you call the timeline. So if you are in a pivot table analyze, there's also an insert timeline. And there you go. I have start date and completion date. I'm more interested on when did they complete it. So I click on completion date. I click OK, and I have the completion date right here. And I could expand this, and it could give me from January to December, okay, of 2020. And it is based on the month. So if I click on January, okay, it will give me, so this mandated training didn't start completing until the month of June. There you go. These are the total number of people that have completed the ADA sensitivity training in the month of June. For the month of July, I have this much, and up to August, there's no more. So they did it in the month of June and July. Now notice I could also use this to drag to select both months. Okay? So I could do it by that. I could also do it by the quarters. So obviously, June and July is part of this. There you go, quarter 2, quarter 3. Okay? And I could also remove the filter and go back again to the months. Okay, to give you the grand total. And that's how, again, this pivot table analyze insert timeline option becomes available. Okay, so that's the timeline. Okay, so you are able to see it. You could also, if you have reports that are actually running to multiple years, you could even consider using the year. If you have a smaller scale, you could use the days. Okay. Now, how do we remove all of this? Simple. If I'm done with it, all I have to do is click on it and press the delete. Can click on it, delete to remove all the slicer, and you're back to your normal report that you have. If you don't like to use the timeline, you could also group or ungroup data in a pivot table. So how do we group? One of the new things that they added when they introduced Excel 2016 to us is the time grouping. Relationship across time-related fields are automatically detected and grouped together when you add the rows of time field to your pivot table. And that's what happened in when you are in Excel 2016 version. Once grouped together, you could drag the group to your pivot table and start your analysis. So how do we do it? So for instance, in this case, I am going to add the completion date, okay, to my columns. So do you see the completion date? Those have completed in June and those who have completed in July. Remember, those are the months, right? So I will expand the month of July. Okay. Okay. And let me just expand both of them, June and July. There you go. So you have the groups. Now, how do we group them, right? Starting, so if I'm right here and you're right, you could actually be able to see it here in your pivot table analyze, right? In the grouping, you see under the group, you have group fields. You will get the grouping dialog box. You see the dialog box starting from June 18 to the ending 7/24/2020. And it is by days and by quarter. Okay. So I will unselect the months, rather days and months. I will unselect the months. So it will do it by days. Notice number of days, I will replace 1 day to 5 days. When I click OK, you notice how they group it for every 5 days, the report that you have. Okay. And that's basically you actually do it. Okay, so that's the way to do this grouping. Now, once you don't want to ungroup anymore, so all you have to do is right click again, and there's an option for you to ungroup it. Click on it, and that will ungroup the option for all of you. Okay, so that's how you ungroup. And again, I will click and save this, and I will now close this, and now go back to my other 2019 mandated training that I have used earlier, because I would like to use this for the next topic. So I'm just going to collapse. Oops, there you go. To collapse this option. Okay, so we have a pivot table. When you would like to create a pivot chart, okay, and what do you do to be able to create a pivot chart when you have the table? So you simply go to the insert ribbon and notice on the right side, okay, you have the pivot chart and you have the chart group. There you go. Okay. So that's where you could actually find a way to be able to create a chart. So for instance, I would like to create a chart, and this is the type of chart, a 3D column chart. So I will just sort this first, the count, sort it by the largest to the smallest, and then create a chart using a 3D column and take a look. That's how quick you will be able to create a chart. Once you create the chart, you now have the pivot chart analyzed because this is currently selected. Okay? And you have the different design. If you hover to the different design, you'll be able to change the design and the layout of the chart that you have based on the different sample that you see right here. Okay, so you could select the layout or the design that you would prefer. If you wanted to change some of the format, like the color of every bar, you could actually be able to do so if you go to the format. The same way that you used to edit a regular chart is the same way you could actually edit a chart, in PivotTable. Now, what if you are just going to create um, from scratch? You're going to build and create your own pivot table and chart at the same time. Will you be able to do that? Yes, you can. So when you are in here, right? If you want to create pivot table and chart at the same time, so you simply click anywhere within the table or list. And again, in the insert ribbon tab. Now look here under the chart, there is an option called pivot chart. I have the pivot chart and pivot chart and pivot table. So I would like to get the chart and the table. So all I have to do is click on this, and I will be able to get the data. This is the source data, and I wanted to put it in a new worksheet. Simply click on OK, and I have both of them. I could put them next to each other. And if I would like to utilize the data that we have earlier, I have the employee ID instead of the count. The sum, I will replace it with a count. And I will use the pay business unit. There you go. There. And that's how it is. And if I wanted to sort it again from largest to smallest, you see how it will sort it. And once you have your data, once again, you could do your pivot table analyze, or you could actually change the layout if you wanted to change the layout depending on the suggested. Okay, and that's basically how you could actually create your pivot table and the chart at the same time. And we're almost finished. It's almost 2 o'clock. And I am just going to go back to our PowerPoint presentation. Once again, I have completely gone over all of this. And this is, of course, your source. And I will also would like to, just like what Thomas said, yes, Thomas, you could put it in the comment section on the survey that you would like to utilize the exercises. I could actually do that. That the only reason why I did not use this is probably I could find another example of data instead of using, this sensitive informations to share. I will try to find another data. The only reason why I use this sensitive, although they are reshuffled, is so that you could easily relate the best way to use the pivot table to the actual work that we do all the time. So this is if you could help me with our survey, you could use your QR code. I will also email. Okay, I'm going to post it for a few minutes so that you could use your cell phone and capture this QR code to do the survey. If not, I'm also going, once I send you the presentation, I'm going to, excuse me, send also our this survey. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for joining me this afternoon. Have a wonderful afternoon, and I will see you again next time. Goodbye. Thank you.